Hi, today we're going to be reviewing the properties of multiplication. We know that the properties of multiplication help make it easier to multiply numbers. The first property that we're going to be talking about is the commutative property. Some of the key vocabulary words that you would like to focus on are going to be to the left. They should also be inside of your math notebook with the definitions. The commutative property of multiplication is a rule that says that the order that we multiply the factors will not change the product. We can switch the factors around and still have the same total number of objects. For example, the first step is to multiply the factors. Then you can switch the order of the factors, multiply the factors again, and compare the products. The answers will be the same. The algebraic equation for this property is a times b equals b times a. All I did was switch the a and the b. The commutative property shows order. When we use the commutative property, we should be able to do some of these verbs that you see at the bottom of the screen. We should be able to calculate products, compare answers, differentiate equations, or apply a rule. In the example above, 3 times 2 is equal to 2 times 3. All I did was switch the numbers. Since 3 times 2 is equal to 6, 2 times 3 is equal to 6 as well. Therefore, 3 times 2 is equal to 2 times 3. The next property that we're going to be going over is the associative property. Again, your key vocabulary words are going to be to the left, and you'll want to pay close attention to the word group and parentheses. The associative property of multiplication is a rule that says that grouping the factors together will not change the product. We can group the factors differently and we will still have the same total number of objects. The first step is to pick 3 numbers. You're going to group them together and multiply inside the parentheses first. Then you can change the grouping and multiply again. Compare the products. The products should be the same. For example, if you have 2 times 3 times 4, and you decide to multiply the 2 and the 3 first, or you can multiply the 3 and the 4 first. The algebraic equation for this property is a times b times c is equal to a times b times c. All I did was change the parentheses from the first 2 numbers to the last 2 numbers. Don't forget to add, after you multiply and divide, you do your multiplication and division first, and then your addition and subtraction, just like in the order of operations. Parentheses, exponents, multiply and divide from left to right, add and subtract from left to right. The associative property shows grouping. When you use the associative property, you should be able to do some of those other verbs for the same problem. You should be able to recognize equations, show how grouping can be done, differentiate between problems, or connect it to larger multiplication problems. In the example, we have 2 times 3 times 4 is equal to 2 times 3 times 4. I just changed the parentheses from the first 2 numbers to the last 2 numbers. 2 times 3 is equal to 6, and then I can multiply it times the 4. That gives me a total of 24. In the second equation, 3 times 4 is equal to 12, and then I can multiply that times the 2, and I still get the answer of 24. Both products are the same. The next property that we're going to be going over is the distributive property. The distributive property's vocabulary is going to be to the left, and you'll want to pay close attention to the words decompose and break apart. That's because the distributive property of multiplication is a rule that says that we can break up a factor into 2 numbers that are simpler to solve using multiplication. The sum of the 2 problems will not change the product. Try to use a 1, a 2, a 5, or a 10. Those are going to be the easiest. When using the steps to follow the distributive property, first you want to distribute one factor into 2 addends that will make up the other factor. For example, 7 could be changed into 5 plus 2. You'll multiply the first problem, then you'll multiply the second problem, and then you'll add the products together. The algebra equation for this property is a times b plus c is equal to a times b plus a times c. You're distributing the a to both of the numbers. You're giving it to both of those numbers. The distributive property works on decomposing or breaking apart. When we use the distributive property, you might be able to match sums to a factor, show ways to decompose a number, formulate ways to decompose a number, or critique another's problem. Could it be done differently? Could they have used different numbers? In the example 2 times 7, I broke down the 7 into 3 and 4. So now I have 2 times 3 plus 2 times 4. I do what's in the parentheses first, so 3 plus 4 is equal to 7, and then I can multiply it times 2. 2 times 7 is equal to 14. In my second problem, I do inside the parentheses first, so 2 times 3 is 6, and 2 times 4 is 8. 6 plus 8 is also equal to 14. The next property that we're going to be reviewing is fairly easy. It's the identity property. And the key vocabulary is going to be right there to the left. And the identity property of multiplication is a rule that just says that the product is always the other number when you multiply by 1. So your steps are to multiply a factor by 1. The product will be the other factor. The algebra equation for this is a times 1 equals a. Anything times 1 is going to be the same number. The last property that we're going to be going over is the zero property, and it has about the same vocabulary. The zero property of multiplication is a rule that says that the product is always 0 when multiplying by 0. So the first step is to multiply a factor by 0, and the product will be 0. The algebra equation for this property is a times 0 equals 0. Any number times 0 is going to equal 0. Now let's try a practice problem. 4 times 5 times 3. Using the commutative property, I can switch the numbers around and have 4 times 3 times 5. I could distribute a number and then break up the 4 into 2 and 2. So 5 times 3 is 15 times, the 4 is now going to change to a 2, plus 15 times the other 2. Or I could use the associative property and group my numbers together. 4 times 5 is equal to 20. And 20 times 3 is equal to 60. So 4 times 5 times 3 is always going to equal 60. You might multiply 4 times 3 is 12 times 5. You might multiply 15 times 2, which is 30. Plus 30. Or you might multiply with multiples of 10, and 20 times 3, 2 times 3 is 6, and you add your 0. Again, all your numbers and equations are going to be equal to 60. Try one on your own. See if you can use all 3 of the properties. And again, you can use any numbers. Doesn't have to be special numbers. You can use as many numbers as you want. So play around and play the numbers game. Thanks for watching.